It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and chaos ruled the night shift. Dr. Amelia Washington pulled her sedan into the hospital parking lot, her hands still trembling from the phone call. A multi-car accident on Highway 95. All hands on deck. Lives hanging in the balance. She grabbed her medical bag from the passenger seat and ran toward the entrance, her sneakers squeaking against the wet asphalt. The automatic doors whooshed open, and she was met by a wall of controlled pandemonium. "Excuse me, I need to get through," she called out, pushing past the crowd of worried families filling the waiting room. That's when she saw him, security guard Marcus Thompson, a hulking man in his 50s with arms crossed and a scowl etched deep into his weathered face. He stepped directly into her path, his massive frame blocking her way to the restricted access doors. "Hold up there, lady. Where do you think you're going?" Dr. Washington's heart hammered against her ribs. Every second counted. "I'm responding to the emergency call. I need to get to the trauma bay immediately." Thompson's eyes swept over her appearance. Faded jeans, a Georgetown University sweatshirt, sneakers that had seen better days. No white coat, no visible ID badge. Just a young black woman with her hair pulled back in a messy bun. "Emergency call?" He let out a harsh laugh. "Lady, you look like you just rolled out of bed. This is a hospital, not a homeless shelter. You need to turn around and walk back out that door." The words hit her like a physical blow. Around them, the controlled chaos of the emergency room continued. Nurses rushing between patient rooms, monitors beeping, family members crying. But in this moment, time seemed frozen. "Sir, I understand there's been a misunderstanding, but I'm a doctor. I was called in for the highway accident victims. Every second we waste—" "Doctor!" Thompson's voice dripped with disbelief. "You're telling me you're a doctor? Looking like that?" Dr. Washington felt her face flush with heat, the familiar burn of humiliation mixed with rage. How many times had she been here before? How many times had she been forced to prove her worth because of the color of her skin? "Yes, I'm a doctor, and I need to get through now." Thompson stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Listen here, girl. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I've been working security at this hospital for 15 years. I know every doctor on staff, and I've never seen your face before. I'm not playing any—" "You're either lost, looking for drugs, or running some kind of scam. Either way, you're not getting past me." He placed his hand on the radio clipped to his belt. "I'm about to call the police and have you arrested for trespassing." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Washington's mind raced. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the waiting room turning toward them. Whispers started to spread like wildfire. "Did you hear that? She's pretending to be a doctor. Probably looking for prescription drugs. How did she even get in here?" Each whisper was a knife to her dignity. But beneath the humiliation, her medical training kicked in. Somewhere beyond those doors, people were dying. People who needed her expertise, her years of training, her steady hands. She took a deep breath and reached for her purse. "I have identification. I can prove—" "I don't care what fake ID you've got cooked up," Thompson interrupted. "You're not fooling anyone. Now, either you walk out of here on your own, or I'll have you dragged out in handcuffs." That's when Nurse Patricia Collins appeared at the security desk. She'd been working the night shift for 8 years, and her tired eyes immediately assessed the situation. A young black woman is being harassed by security. She'd seen this movie before. "What's going on here, Marcus?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. "Just removing some trash that wandered in off the street," Thompson replied, his chest puffing out with pride. "This girl thinks she can waltz in here claiming to be a doctor. Can you believe that?" Patricia looked at Dr. Washington, taking in her appearance. the expensive watch on her wrist, the way she carried herself despite the situation, the medical bag clutched in her hands. "Ma'am, do you have any identification?" Patricia asked gently. Dr. Washington nodded gratefully and began reaching for her wallet, but Thompson's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "Don't even think about it. I'm not interested in seeing some fake ID you bought online." "Let go of me!" Dr. Washington yanked her arm back, her voice rising. "You have no right to put your hands on me." The physical contact was the final straw. The emergency room fell silent except for the steady beeping of monitors and the distant sound of sirens approaching. Everyone was watching now. Patients, family members, and staff. All eyes on the young black woman being manhandled by hospital security. "I have every right," Thompson snarled. "You're trespassing on private property. You're impersonating a medical professional. And now you're getting belligerent." Dr. Washington's hands shook with rage and frustration. "I am a medical professional. I graduated summa cum laude from Johns Hopkins Medical School. I completed my residency at Massachusetts General Hospital. I've saved more lives than you can count." "Sure you have, sweetheart. And I'm the Surgeon General." The mockery in his voice was unbearable, but it was the laughter from some of the onlookers that really cut deep. People who looked at her and saw nothing but a young black woman who didn't belong. "Marcus, maybe we should just—" Patricia began. "No," Thompson cut her off. "I'm calling the police. This has gone far enough." He reached for his radio, but before he could make the call, the automatic doors burst open. A paramedic team rushed in, wheeling a gurney carrying a man covered in blood. Behind them, another team with a young woman who wasn't moving. "We've got multiple trauma victims incoming," the lead paramedic shouted. "Where's the trauma team?" And that's when Dr. Washington saw her chance. Without hesitation, she dropped her purse and ran toward the gurney. Her medical instincts overrode everything else. The humiliation, the anger, the security guard shouting behind her, "Get back here! Someone stop her!" But Dr. Washington was already at the patient's side, her hands moving with practiced precision. She checked his pulse, examined his wounds, and assessed his breathing. The paramedic looked at her with confusion. "Who are you?" "Dr. Amelia Washington. What's his status?" The paramedic's eyes widened. He'd been doing this job for 12 years, and he could tell the difference between someone who knew what they were doing and someone who was pretending. This woman knew exactly what she was doing. 34-year-old male, multiple lacerations, possible internal bleeding, blood pressure dropping fast. Dr. Washington nodded grimly. "We need to get him to surgery immediately. Where's the trauma team?" "On their way, but there's no time." She looked up at Patricia, who was still standing nearby in shock. "I need you to prep OR3. This man is going to bleed out if we don't move now." Patricia stared at her for a moment, then made a decision. Something about the way this woman took charge, the confidence in her voice, the way she seemed to know exactly what needed to be done. "Right away, doctor." As Patricia ran toward the operating rooms, Thompson finally caught up. His face was red with rage and embarrassment. "Get away from that patient! You're not a doctor! Security, I need backup!" But Dr. Washington ignored him completely. She was in her element now, doing what she'd been trained to do, what she'd dedicated her life to doing. "We need to move him now," she said to the paramedic. "The bleeding is getting worse." The paramedic nodded and began pushing the gurney towards the trauma bay. Dr. Washington kept pace alongside, her hands never leaving the patient, monitoring his vitals, preparing for what was to come. Thompson ran after them, shouting orders that no one seemed to be following. "Stop! Don't let her near that patient. She's not authorized to be here." But it was too late. The doors to the trauma bay swung shut behind them, leaving Thompson standing alone in the hallway, his authority completely undermined. Inside the trauma bay, Dr. Washington's transformation was complete. Gone was the uncertain young woman being harassed by security. In her place stood a confident, skilled surgeon who commanded respect through her actions. "I need 2 units of O-negative blood, stat," she called out to the trauma team that had finally arrived. "And get me a CBC and a comprehensive metabolic panel. This patient has lost a lot of blood." The attending trauma surgeon, Dr. James Morrison, looked at her with confusion. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "Dr. Amelia Washington. I happened to be here when the ambulance arrived. This patient needs immediate surgery." Dr. Morrison frowned. "I don't recognize you. Are you staff here?" It was the question she'd been dreading. The moment when she'd have to explain herself all over again. But before she could answer, the patient's blood pressure alarm started blaring. "We're losing him!" the trauma nurse shouted. Dr. Washington didn't hesitate. She grabbed the defibrillator paddles and charged them. "Clear!" The patient's body arched as the electric current ran through him. Dr. Washington checked the monitor, still flatlining. "Charging again, clear." This time the monitor showed a weak but steady heartbeat. The patient was stabilized, but barely. "We need to get him to surgery now," Dr. Washington said, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. "He's got internal bleeding that won't stop without surgical intervention." Dr. Morrison looked at her with new respect. Whoever this woman was, she knew what she was doing. "All right, let's move." As they wheeled the patient toward the elevator, Thompson appeared again, this time with backup. 2 more security guards flanked him, and he was speaking rapidly into his radio. "There she is! The imposter! Don't let her get on that elevator!" But Dr. Morrison stepped between them and the elevator doors. "This woman just saved a man's life. Whatever your issue is, it can wait." "She's not a doctor," Thompson protested. "She's some kind of scam artist." The elevator doors closed, leaving Thompson's shouts echoing in the hallway. But Dr. Washington barely heard them. Her focus was entirely on the patient whose life hung in the balance. As they rode up to the operating floor, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Thompson wouldn't let this go. He'd make sure everyone knew about the fake doctor who'd somehow infiltrated the hospital. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, she had a job to do. The elevator doors opened, and they rushed toward the operating room. Dr. Washington scrubbed in alongside Dr. Morrison, her hands moving through the familiar ritual of preparation. "So, Dr. Washington," Dr. Morrison said as they scrubbed, "what's your specialty?" "Emergency medicine and trauma surgery." "And you just happened to be here tonight?" Dr. Washington hesitated. How much should she tell him? How much could she tell him without revealing the truth that would change everything? "I was called in for the highway accident," she said finally. "Multiple casualties." Dr. Morrison nodded. "Well, I'm glad you were here. This patient wouldn't have made it without your quick thinking." They entered the operating room, and for the next 3 hours, Dr. Washington lost herself in the work. The careful precision of surgery, the satisfaction of repairing what was broken, the quiet triumph of saving a life. When it was over, when the patient was stable and recovering, she finally allowed herself to think about what waited for her outside the OR. Thompson would be there, probably with more security guards, maybe even the police. She'd have to face the accusations, the disbelief, the assumption that she couldn't possibly be who she claimed to be. But as she looked at the monitors showing her patient's strong, steady heartbeat, she knew it had been worth it. This is why she'd become a doctor. This is why she'd endured years of discrimination and doubt. For moments like this, Dr. Morrison appeared beside her, pulling off his surgical mask. "Excellent work, doctor. Where did you say you were from?" "I didn't." He raised an eyebrow. "Well, Wherever you're from, they trained you well. I'd like to talk to you about joining our trauma team." Dr. Washington almost smiled. If only he knew. "I appreciate the offer, Dr. Morrison, but I think there might be some complications with that." "What kind of complications?" Before she could answer, the OR doors burst open. Thompson stood there with 3 security guards, a police officer, and a hospital administrator she didn't recognize. "There she is!" Thompson pointed an accusing finger at her. "That's the woman who's been impersonating a doctor." Dr. Morrison stepped protectively in front of her. "What is the meaning of this? This woman just helped me save a man's life." "I don't care what she did," Thompson snarled. "She's a fraud. She snuck into this hospital pretending to be a doctor, and I want her arrested." The police officer, a young man who looked uncomfortable with the situation, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification." Dr. Washington nodded calmly. "Of course, officer." She reached into her pocket and pulled out her wallet. Her hands were steady as she handed over her driver's license and medical license. The officer examined them carefully. Dr. Amelia Washington. "That's right," Thompson scoffed. "Those are fake. I told you she'd have fake IDs." But the officer was studying the documents more closely. "These look legitimate to me. The medical license is current, issued by the State Medical Board." "Run them through the system," Thompson demanded. "You'll see they're forgeries." The officer looked at Dr. Washington. "Ma'am, would you mind if I verified these credentials?" "Not at all." The officer stepped aside to make a phone call. While he was gone, the hospital administrator finally spoke up. "I'm Robert Dolson, Assistant Director of Hospital Operations. I have to say, I'm very confused by this situation. Dr. Morrison, you're saying this woman assisted with surgery." "She didn't assist, Dr. Morrison corrected. "She led the initial trauma response. The patient would have died without her intervention." Dolson looked at Dr. Washington with growing interest. "And you are?" "Dr. Amelia Washington." "From which hospital?" Dr. Washington took a deep breath. The moment of truth was approaching faster than she'd expected. "Actually, Mr. Dolson, I think there's something you should know." The police officer returned, cutting her off. "I ran the license through the database. It's legitimate. Dr. Amelia Washington is a licensed physician in good standing." Thompson's face turned red. "That's impossible. I've been working security at this hospital for 15 years. I know every doctor on staff." "Maybe you don't know them as well as you think," Dr. Morrison said coolly, but the administrator was looking at Dr. Washington with a strange expression. "Dr. Washington, that name sounds familiar. Are you—" "Yes, Mr. Dolson, I believe we need to talk." The room fell silent. Everyone could sense that something significant was about to happen, but they couldn't quite put their finger on what. Dr. Washington straightened her shoulders and looked directly at Thompson. "I think it's time you learned exactly who you've been harassing tonight." Thompson's bravado began to waver. "I don't care who you think you are. You came into this hospital looking like—" "Looking like what?" Dr. Washington's voice was calm but carried an edge of steel. "Like someone who doesn't belong? Like someone who couldn't possibly be a doctor?" That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" The administrator stepped forward. "Dr. Washington, I think we should take this conversation somewhere private." "No," Dr. Washington said firmly. "I think everyone here deserves to hear this, especially Mr. Thompson." She turned to face the security guard who had humiliated her, who had put his hands on her. He had threatened to have her arrested for the crime of being black in a hospital. "Mr. Thompson, you said you know every doctor on staff. Well, let me ask you something. Do you know who the director of emergency medicine is at this hospital?" Thompson's face went pale. "Dr. Washington." The new director is Dr. A. Washington. But that's what, Mr. Thompson. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His knees actually buckled slightly, and he had to grab the wall for support. You're not... I'm Dr. Amelia Washington. I've been the director of emergency medicine at this hospital for exactly 1 week. Today was supposed to be my first day of orientation. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in the room stared at her with a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and growing horror at what had just transpired. Mr. Dolson looked like he might faint. Dr. Washington, I am so sorry. I had no idea. Your orientation was scheduled for tomorrow morning. I thought, when you didn't show up, I was called in for the emergency, the multi-car accident. I came straight from home, which is why I wasn't dressed in professional attire. Dr. Morrison shook his head in disbelief. You're the new director, but you're so young. I'm 34. I've been practicing emergency medicine for 8 years. I was recruited from Johns Hopkins because of my expertise in trauma surgery and emergency response protocols. Thompson was backing toward the door, his face ashen. I didn't know. I mean, how was I supposed to? You were supposed to treat me with basic human dignity, Dr. Washington said quietly. You were supposed to listen when I told you I was a doctor. You were supposed to check my credentials instead of making assumptions based on my appearance. The police officer cleared his throat. Dr. Washington, would you like to press charges? Assault, false imprisonment, denial of civil rights. Dr. Washington considered it. The humiliation, the public embarrassment, the way Thompson had grabbed her arm, the threats of arrest. She had every right to pursue criminal charges, but as she looked at Thompson, she saw something she recognized. Fear. The same fear she'd felt when he'd threatened to have her arrested. The fear of having your life turned upside down by forces beyond your control. No charges, she said finally, but I think Mr. Thompson and I need to have a conversation about what happened here tonight. Dolson stepped forward. Dr. Washington, please let me apologize on behalf of the entire hospital. This is completely unacceptable. I assure you that there will be consequences for this behavior. We'll discuss that later, Mr. Dolson. Right now, I need to check on our other patients from the accident. How many more casualties are there? The administrator looked confused by the quick shift back to medical matters. I believe there were 3 more ambulances en route. Then we need to prepare the trauma team. Dr. Morrison, are you available to assist? Dr. Morrison nodded, still looking stunned. Of course, Director. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Washington turned back to Thompson one more time. Mr. Thompson, I want you to think about something. Tonight, you almost prevented a doctor from saving a man's life. Not because I was unqualified, not because I was dangerous, but because you looked at me and decided I didn't belong. Think about that. Thompson's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Dr. Washington walked toward the elevator, her head held high. Behind her, she could hear whispered conversations beginning. Did you hear that? She's the new director. Oh my God, Thompson is in so much trouble. She handled that with such grace. If it were me. The elevator doors closed and Dr. Washington finally allowed herself to breathe. The confrontation was over, but she knew the real work was just beginning. As the elevator descended toward the emergency department, she thought about the patient she'd just saved, about the lives she'd been trained to protect, about the barriers she'd had to overcome to get here. This was just the first night. There would be more challenges ahead, more people who would question her qualifications, more situations where she'd have to prove herself over and over again. But tonight, she'd done what she'd come here to do. She'd saved a life. And maybe, just maybe, she'd opened some eyes in the process. The elevator doors opened and Dr. Washington stepped out into the emergency department, her emergency department, ready to face whatever came next. The hospital buzzed with nervous energy as word spread through the corridors, like wildfire. By 6 a.m., everyone from the night janitor to the chief of surgery had heard some version of the story. A black woman claiming to be a doctor. Security tried to throw her out. A dramatic surgery that saved a life. But the most shocking detail was still spreading in hushed whispers. The woman was Dr. Amelia Washington, the new director of emergency medicine. In the administrative offices on the 7th floor, Robert Dolson sat across from his supervisor, Chief Operating Officer Margaret Sullivan. The phone hadn't stopped ringing since the incident, and Sullivan's face grew darker with each new detail. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Sullivan said, her voice carefully controlled. "Our head of security physically restrained the new director of emergency medicine, threatened to have her arrested, and prevented her from responding to a medical emergency?" Dolson nodded miserably. "That's the situation, yes. And this happened in front of patients, families, and staff. The entire waiting room witnessed it." Sullivan rubbed her temples. "How many people are we talking about?" "At least 30, maybe more. And I'm sure they all have cell phones." Dolson's stomach dropped. He hadn't even thought about social media. "Oh, God." "Exactly." Sullivan stood up and began pacing. "We have a public relations nightmare on our hands. A discrimination lawsuit waiting to happen, and worst of all, we humiliated a brilliant physician whom we recruited specifically to improve our emergency department. What do you want me to do?" "First, Thompson is suspended pending a full investigation. Second, I want every witness interviewed by HR within the next 24 hours. Third, I want a formal apology drafted and approved by legal. And fourth, I want you to personally ensure that Dr. Washington has everything she needs to do her job effectively." Dolson nodded, taking notes as quickly as he could. "Should I prepare for her to resign?" Sullivan stopped pacing. "Would you stay after being treated like that?" "Probably not." "Then we need to convince her that this was an isolated incident, that we value her contributions, that we're committed to creating an inclusive environment." "How do we do that?" "We start by firing Thompson." Meanwhile, 3 floors down, Marcus Thompson sat in the security office facing his supervisor, Director of Security James Parker. Thompson's hands shook as he recounted the night's events, trying to put the best possible spin on what had happened. "I was just doing my job," he insisted. "She didn't look like a doctor. She wasn't wearing scrubs or a white coat. She had no visible identification. How was I supposed to know?" Parker leaned back in his chair. "Marcus, how long have you been working security?" 15 years. And in those 15 years, have you ever seen a doctor come in after hours in regular clothes?" Thompson shifted uncomfortably. "Well, yes, but have you ever seen a doctor come in response to an emergency call, wearing whatever they had on when they got the call?" "Yes, but this was different." "How was it different?" Thompson's face flushed. She just didn't look like... "Like what, Marcus?" The question hung in the air. Thompson knew he was walking into a trap, but he couldn't find a way around it. "She didn't look professional," he said finally. "Or she didn't look white." "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" Parker stood up and walked to the window. "Marcus, I've known you for 8 years. You're a good man. You've got grandchildren you adore. You volunteer at your church. But what happened last night was wrong. You know it, and I know it." Thompson's shoulders sagged. I see so many people trying to scam their way into the hospital. People looking for drugs, people pretending to be family members, people trying to get access to areas they shouldn't be in. I was just trying to protect the hospital." "I understand that." But you didn't protect anyone last night. You embarrassed a distinguished physician, humiliated her in front of dozens of people, and potentially put lives at risk by preventing her from responding to an emergency. She got through anyway. She saved the patient. No thanks to you." The words stung. Thompson had been proud of his work at the hospital. He'd thought of himself as a guardian, protecting staff and patients from dangerous people. But as he sat in his supervisor's office, he began to realize how wrong he'd been. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "You're suspended pending a full investigation. There will be meetings with HR, probably some kind of disciplinary action. And Marcus, you need to think long and hard about what happened last night, because the way you treated Dr. Washington was unacceptable." Thompson nodded slowly. Can I apologize to her?" "That's not up to me. That's up to her." As Thompson left the security office, he felt the weight of stares from his colleagues. Word had spread through the hospital's staff network faster than he'd imagined possible. Everyone knew what he'd done. In the emergency department, the morning shift was buzzing with activity. Dr. Washington had worked through the night, treating the remaining accident victims and handling the usual flow of emergency cases. She'd barely had time to process what had happened with Thompson. Nurse Patricia Collins approached her with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression. "Dr. Washington, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine, Patricia. Thank you for asking." "What happened last night? I want you to know that not everyone here thinks like Thompson. Most of us were horrified by how he treated you." Dr. Washington looked at her with genuine gratitude. "I appreciate that, and I want to thank you for trusting me when it mattered. You helped save a life." Patricia smiled. "I could tell you knew what you were doing. The way you took charge, the way you handled the trauma response, it was impressive. It's what I was trained to do. Still, not everyone would have pushed through what you went through. A lot of people would have just walked away." Dr. Washington considered this. "I thought about it. But there were people who needed medical care. That has to come first." As they spoke, Dr. Morrison approached with a tablet in his hands. "Dr. Washington, I've been reviewing the surgical notes from last night. Your technique was flawless. The patient is recovering beautifully." "How is he doing?" "Awake and alert. He's been asking about the doctor who saved his life. He wants to thank you." Dr. Washington felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was why she'd gone into medicine. This was why she'd endured years of discrimination and doubt. For moments like this. "I'd like to see him," she said. They walked together toward the recovery ward, passing other staff members who had heard about the incident. Some looked at her with sympathy, others with curiosity, and a few with what appeared to be newfound respect. In room 314, Michael Rodriguez lay propped up in bed, his wife Maria holding his hand. When Dr. Washington entered, his face lit up with recognition. "You're the doctor who saved my life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm Dr. Washington. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," he said with a weak smile, "but alive, thanks to you." Maria squeezed his hand. "The nurses told us what happened, how that security guard tried to stop you from helping. I can't believe someone would do that." Dr. Washington felt uncomfortable with the attention. "I was just doing my job." "No," Michael said firmly. "You went above and beyond. You fought to help me even when people were trying to stop you. That's not just doing your job. That's being a hero." The word hit Dr. Washington unexpectedly. She'd never thought of herself as a hero. She was just a doctor trying to help people. But as she looked at Michael's face, at the genuine gratitude in his eyes, she began to understand the impact of what had happened. "Thank you," she said softly. Both of you, get some rest, and I'll check on you later." As she left the room, Dr. Washington realized that word of the incident was spreading beyond the hospital walls. Maria Rodriguez had a cell phone in her hand, and she was typing rapidly. Social media posts, most likely. The story was getting out. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her mentor, Dr. Sarah Potter, who ran the emergency department at Johns Hopkins. "Amelia, I'm hearing rumors about something happening at your new hospital. Are you okay? Call me when you get a chance." Dr. Washington sighed. The news was traveling faster than she'd expected. She made a mental note to call Dr. Potter later and explain what had happened. In the hospital's public relations office, Director of Communications Jessica Martinez was fielding calls from local news stations. The story had broken on social media around 8 a.m., and by 9 a.m., it was trending on Twitter. Black doctor denied entry to ER by security guard. Physician fights discrimination while saving lives. Hospital security stops doctor from treating patients. The headlines were damaging, but the real problem was the video. Someone in the waiting room had recorded part of the confrontation on their phone. The footage showed Thompson grabbing Dr. Washington's arm and threatening to have her arrested. It was a public relations nightmare. Martinez knocked on Chief Operating Officer Sullivan's door. "We have a problem." Sullivan looked up from her computer. "How bad?" "The video has been viewed over 50,000 times. It's being shared by civil rights groups, medical organizations, and local news outlets. We're getting calls from reporters asking for comment." "What do we know about the person who posted it?" "Maria Rodriguez. Her husband was the patient doctor. Washington operated on. She's been posting updates about his recovery and praising Dr. Washington for saving his life." Sullivan rubbed her temples. "So we can't even complain about the video being posted without looking like we're attacking the family of a patient." "Exactly, and there's more. The state medical board is asking questions. They want to know why a licensed physician was prevented from providing emergency care." "Get me a meeting with Dr. Washington as soon as possible. We need to get ahead of this. She's been working all night. She's exhausted. Then we wait until she's ready. But we need to talk to her before this gets any worse." Meanwhile, in the hospital cafeteria, conversations at every table centered on the incident. The story had taken on a life of its own, with details being added and embellished with each retelling. "I heard she had to perform surgery without proper authorization. Someone said Thompson actually put her in handcuffs. Did you hear she's one of the top emergency physicians in the country?" Dr. Washington entered the cafeteria looking for a quiet place to eat lunch. But every conversation stopped when she appeared. The silence was deafening. She grabbed a sandwich and a bottle of water, then looked around for an empty table. That's when she noticed Dr. Morrison waving her over to join a group of physicians. "Dr. Washington, please sit with us," he said. She approached the table cautiously. The other doctors looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "I'm Dr. Lisa Park, Chief of Surgery," said a woman in her 50s. "I wanted to personally apologize for what happened last night. Thompson's behavior was completely unacceptable." "Thank you, Dr. Park. I also wanted to say that your surgical technique was impressive. Dr. Morrison showed me the operative notes. Where did you train?" "Johns Hopkins for medical school, Massachusetts General for residency." "Impressive credentials. How did you end up here?" Dr. Washington hesitated. How much should she reveal about her background, about the challenges she'd faced, about the other hospitals where she'd been passed over for positions despite her qualifications? "I was recruited by the hospital board," she said finally. "They were looking for someone with experience in emergency medicine and trauma surgery." "Well, their loss is our gain," said Dr. Park. "I look forward to working with you." As the conversation continued, Dr. Washington began to feel something she hadn't experienced in a long time at a hospital: acceptance. These physicians were treating her as a colleague, not as someone who had to prove herself. But even as she enjoyed the camaraderie, she knew that the real test was yet to come. The incident with Thompson was just the beginning. There would be investigations, interviews, and probably media attention. The way the hospital handled the situation would determine whether she stayed or looked for another position. Her phone buzzed with another text message. This time, it was from her sister, Dr. Michelle Washington, who worked as a pediatrician in Atlanta. "Amelia, I just saw the video. Are you okay? Do you need me to come up there? I'm so proud of how you handled yourself." Dr. Washington typed back quickly, "I'm fine, just tired. It's been a long night." This is exactly what we talked about. The same thing that happened to me in residency. Are you going to stay? That was the question Dr. Washington had been avoiding. Was she going to stay at a hospital where the head of security had physically restrained her and threatened to have her arrested, where she had been humiliated in front of dozens of people? "I don't know yet," she replied. "Whatever you decide, I support you. But remember what Dad always said." Dr. Washington smiled despite her exhaustion. Their father, Dr. Robert Washington, had been one of the first black physicians in their hometown. He'd faced discrimination that made her experience look mild by comparison. "Sometimes you have to stay and fight," she typed, finishing the quote. "Sometimes that's the only way things change." Exactly. Love you, sis. Love you too. As Dr. Washington finished her lunch, she noticed that the cafeteria had gradually filled with people who seemed to be looking for excuses to walk past her table. Word was spreading and she was becoming something of a celebrity within the hospital. But celebrity status came with a price. Her phone was buzzing constantly with calls from reporters, requests for interviews, and messages from medical colleagues around the country who had heard about the incident. Dr. Washington realized that what had happened to her was bigger than just one embarrassing encounter with a security guard. It was a symbol of the barriers that black physicians still faced in the medical profession, the assumptions people made based on appearance, the extra scrutiny, the constant need to prove yourself. She thought about all the young black women who might be inspired by her story, but she also thought about the young black women who might be discouraged from pursuing medicine because of what they'd seen in that video. The responsibility felt overwhelming. At 2 p.m., Dr. Washington's pager buzzed with a message from hospital administration. Chief Operating Officer Sullivan wanted to meet with her as soon as possible. She found Sullivan's office on the 7th floor, a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Sullivan, a woman in her early 60s with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, stood up when Dr. Washington entered. "Dr. Washington, please sit down. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Sullivan sat across from her, her expression serious. "First, I want to apologize personally for what happened last night. Thompson's behavior was completely unacceptable and does not reflect the values of this hospital." "I appreciate that. I also want you to know that we're taking this matter very seriously. Thompson has been suspended pending a full investigation. Depending on the findings, he may face termination." Dr. Washington nodded. "What does the investigation involve?" "Interviews with all witnesses, review of security footage, examination of hospital policies and procedures. We want to understand exactly what happened and why, so we can prevent it from happening again." "And what about the media attention?" Sullivan's expression grew more serious. "I won't lie to you. This is becoming a significant public relations issue. The video has been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. We're getting calls from news outlets, civil rights organizations, and medical associations. What kind of calls? Questions about our hiring practices, our commitment to diversity, and our treatment of minority physicians. Some are calling for boycotts of the hospital. Dr. Washington felt a knot forming in her stomach. I never wanted this to become a public spectacle. I know you didn't, but sometimes these things take on a life of their own. The question is, how do we handle it moving forward? What do you mean? Sullivan leaned forward. We could issue a statement condemning Thompson's actions and emphasizing our commitment to equality. We could implement new training programs for security staff. We could bring in diversity consultants to review our policies. That sounds reasonable. But here's the thing, Dr. Washington. None of that will matter if you don't stay. If you leave, it looks like we drove you out. It validates every criticism being made about this hospital. Dr. Washington understood the subtext. The hospital needed her to stay, not just because she was qualified, but because her departure would be a public relations disaster. So you're asking me to stay for the good of the hospital. I'm asking you to stay because you're an excellent physician who was recruited specifically to improve our emergency department. What happened with Thompson was wrong, but it doesn't change the fact that we need you here. Dr. Washington considered this. What assurances can you give me that something like this won't happen again? New protocols for security staff when dealing with physicians, mandatory diversity training for all employees, regular reviews of incidents involving minority staff members. And if I stay, what support will I have? Whatever you need, additional staffing, new equipment, budget for training and development. We're prepared to make significant investments in the emergency department. Dr. Washington looked out the window at the city below. Somewhere out there, people were sharing her story, debating what had happened, and forming opinions about her and the hospital. I need some time to think about it, she said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. As Dr. Washington left Sullivan's office, she felt the weight of the decision ahead of her. Stay and fight to change the system from within, or leave and find somewhere else that might be more welcoming. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dr. Washington, this is Michael Rodriguez. I wanted to thank you again for saving my life. I hope you know that what happened with security doesn't represent how most people feel about you. You're a hero. The message brought tears to her eyes. This was why she'd gone into medicine, to help people like Michael Rodriguez, to save lives and make a difference. But as she walked back toward the emergency department, she passed a group of security guards who fell silent when they saw her. She felt their eyes following her, and she wondered what they were thinking. Was she the troublemaker who'd gotten their colleague in trouble? Or was she the doctor who'd been wronged? The answer would determine whether she could build a successful career at this hospital or whether she'd be fighting an uphill battle every day. 3 days after the incident, Dr. Washington sat in her temporary office reviewing patient charts when her assistant knocked on the door. Dr. Washington, there's someone here to see you. A reporter from Channel 7 News. Dr. Washington's heart sank. She'd been avoiding media requests, hoping the story would die down naturally. But the attention seemed to be growing rather than diminishing. Tell them I'm not available for interviews. She says it's about Thompson. She has information you might want to hear. Dr. Washington hesitated. What kind of information could a reporter have about Thompson that she didn't already know? Send her in. The reporter who entered was a woman in her 30s, with short brown hair and an earnest expression. She carried a tablet and a small recording device. Dr. Washington, I'm Sarah Jenkins from Channel 7. Thank you for seeing me. I'm not giving any interviews about what happened. I understand, but I think you should know that this isn't the first time something like this has happened at this hospital. Dr. Washington looked up from her chart. What do you mean? Jenkins pulled out her tablet and showed her a series of documents. I've been investigating complaints filed against Marcus Thompson over the past 5 years. There have been 7 formal complaints, all involving minority staff members or patients. Dr. Washington felt her stomach drop. 7. Dr. Patricia Williams, an African-American physician, complained that Thompson questioned her credentials and prevented her from accessing the ICU during a medical emergency. That was 3 years ago. What happened to the complaint? It was dismissed. Thompson claimed he was following security protocols. Jenkins scrolled to another document. 2 years ago, Dr. Carlos Mendez, a Latino physician, filed a complaint saying Thompson had detained him for over an hour, demanding multiple forms of identification and calling his credentials into question. And, also dismissed, Thompson said Dr. Mendez was being uncooperative. Dr. Washington felt a growing sense of outrage. Are you telling me this hospital knew Thompson had a pattern of targeting minority physicians, and they did nothing about it? That's what the evidence suggests. There are also complaints from nurses, technicians, and even patients' family members. Jenkins showed her more documents. Here's a complaint from the family of an elderly black patient. They said Thompson was unnecessarily aggressive during a routine security check, making the patient feel unwelcome and unsafe. How did you get these documents? Public records requests. Formal complaints become part of the hospital's documentation. Most people don't know they can access them. Dr. Washington stared at the documents, her mind racing. If Jenkins was right, then what had happened to her wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that the hospital had ignored for years. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Because I think the public deserves to know the truth. This wasn't just one bad night with one security guard. This was a systemic problem that the hospital administration allowed to continue. What do you want from me? I want you to go on record about what happened. Help me tell the complete story. Dr. Washington shook her head. I can't. I'm still employed here. I have to think about my career. I understand, but Dr. Washington, you have an opportunity to make sure this never happens again. Not just to you, but to other physicians who might face the same treatment. After Jenkins left, Dr. Washington sat alone in her office, staring at copies of the complaint documents the reporter had given her. The pattern was clear and disturbing. Dr. Patricia Williams had been prevented from reaching a critically ill patient. Dr. Carlos Mendez had been detained and humiliated. Nurses had been questioned and searched. Family members had been treated with suspicion and hostility. All of them were people of color. All of them had been treated differently from their white colleagues. Dr. Washington picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. Dr. Williams? This is Amelia Washington. I'm calling about Marcus Thompson. The conversation that followed was eye-opening. Dr. Williams, now working at a hospital in another state, had left St. Mary's partly because of her treatment by Thompson and the administration's failure to address it. I filed a formal complaint, Doctor, Williams explained. I provided witnesses, documentation, everything they asked for, but they said there wasn't enough evidence to take action. What exactly happened? I was responding to a code blue in the ICU. Thompson stopped me at the entrance and demanded to see my ID. When I showed it to him, he said it looked suspicious and called security backup. I was detained for 20 minutes while they verified my credentials. During a medical emergency? During a medical emergency, the patient nearly died because of the delay. Dr. Washington felt sick. Did you consider legal action? I consulted with a lawyer. He said it would be difficult to prove discrimination without a pattern of behavior. One incident might be explained away as a misunderstanding. But if there were multiple incidents... Exactly, but I was the only one willing to come forward at the time. The other physicians who'd had problems with Thompson were afraid to speak up. They didn't want to be seen as troublemakers. After the call, Dr. Washington sat in her office thinking about the choice in front of her. She could stay quiet, focus on her work, and hope that the new policies Sullivan had promised would prevent future incidents. Or she could speak up, knowing that it might make her a target for retaliation, but also knowing that her silence might allow the pattern to continue. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed it was her father. "Amelia, honey, I saw the news reports. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Dad. Just trying to figure out what to do next." "What do you mean?" Dr. Washington told him about the reporter's visit, the pattern of complaints, and the other physicians who had been targeted. "So this wasn't an isolated incident," her father said quietly. "Number, it wasn't. Then you know what you have to do." "Do I?" "Amelia, when I was starting out, I faced discrimination that was much more overt than what you experienced. Hospitals that wouldn't hire black physicians, patients who refused to be treated by me, colleagues who questioned my qualifications every single day." "I know, Dad, but I also had a choice. I could accept it and try to work within the system, or I could fight back. I chose to fight, not just for myself, but for the physicians who would come after me. And look how that turned out. You spent your entire career fighting battles that shouldn't have been necessary." "That's true, but I also opened doors for you and your sister. I made it possible for you to have opportunities that I never had." Dr. Washington felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm scared, Dad. If I speak out, it could destroy my career." "And if you don't speak out, how many other physicians will face the same treatment you did?" That evening, Dr. Washington called Sarah Jenkins. "I'll do the interview," she said, "but I want to tell the complete story, not just what happened to me, but what's been happening to other physicians for years." "Are you sure? Once this story airs, there's no going back." "I'm sure." The next morning, Dr. Washington met Jenkins at a coffee shop near the hospital. The camera crew was discreet, and they chose a quiet corner where they could speak privately. "Dr. Washington, let's start with what happened 3 nights ago. Can you walk me through the events?" Dr. Washington took a deep breath and began telling her story. She described the emergency call, her rush to the hospital, and the confrontation with Thompson. "What went through your mind when he grabbed your arm?" "I was shocked. As a physician, I'm used to being treated with respect, but in that moment I wasn't seen as a doctor. I was seen as a threat." "Why do you think that was?" Dr. Washington chose her words carefully. "I think there were assumptions made about me based on my appearance. I'm a young black woman, and I wasn't dressed in traditional medical attire, but those assumptions nearly prevented me from saving a man's life." "You've since learned that other physicians have had similar experiences with the same security guard." "Yes, I've spoken with Dr. Patricia Williams, who left this hospital after filing a complaint about Thompson's behavior. There's a pattern here that can't be ignored." "What kind of pattern?" "Minority physicians are being subjected to additional scrutiny, being questioned about their credentials, and being prevented from accessing areas of the hospital they need to access to do their jobs." "How does this make you feel?" Dr. Washington paused, considering her answer. "It makes me angry, but it also makes me determined. I went into medicine to help people, and I won't let anyone prevent me from doing that." "What do you want to see happen as a result of this incident?" "I want to see real change, not just policy changes on paper, but actual cultural change. I want minority physicians to feel welcome and respected in this hospital. I want patients to receive the best possible care without barriers created by discrimination. Are you planning to stay at the hospital? Yes. I'm staying because someone needs to fight for change from within the system, and because there are patients who need medical care, and that has to come first. When the interview aired that evening, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Dr. Washington's phone was flooded with calls from physicians around the country sharing their own experiences with discrimination. Medical organizations issued statements of support. Patient advocacy groups called for investigations into hospital security practices. But there was also backlash. Some viewers criticized Dr. Washington for playing the race card. Others suggested she was seeking attention or trying to profit from the incident. The hospital administration was caught off guard by the intensity of the response. By the next morning, Chief Operating Officer Sullivan was fielding calls from board members, regulators, and accreditation agencies. "We have a serious problem," she told her staff in an emergency meeting. "This story has gone national. We're getting calls from medical journals, civil rights organizations, and government agencies." "What kind of calls?" asked Robert Dulson. "The State Medical Board wants to conduct a review of our credentialing and security practices. The Joint Commission is asking questions about our compliance with non-discrimination policies. And the NAACP is calling for a federal investigation." "What about Thompson?" "Thompson is the least of our problems now. The real issue is the pattern of complaints that were ignored. We have a systemic problem that we failed to address, and now it's public knowledge." "What do we do?" Sullivan looked around the room at her staff. "We do what we should have done years ago. We take this seriously. We implement real changes, and we make sure this never happens again." Meanwhile, in the emergency department, Dr. Washington was trying to focus on her work despite the media attention. She'd been treating patients all morning, but she could sense the tension among the staff. Some of her colleagues were supportive, praising her courage in speaking out. Others seemed uncomfortable with the attention the hospital was receiving. During a brief break, Dr. Morrison approached her. "Dr. Washington, I wanted to thank you for what you did." "Thank me for what?" "For staying, for fighting, for making sure this gets addressed properly. I haven't done anything yet except tell the truth. Sometimes that's the most important thing you can do." As the day continued, Dr. Washington began to realize that her decision to speak out had set in motion a chain of events that would affect not just her own career, but the entire culture of the hospital. She'd crossed a line that she couldn't uncross. From now on, she would be known not just as a physician, but as the physician who had challenged the system and demanded change. It was a responsibility she hadn't asked for, but one she was determined to handle with the same precision and dedication she brought to her medical practice. 2 weeks after the interview aired, the hospital brought in Dr. Angela Foster, a respected expert in healthcare discrimination and organizational culture. Dr. Foster had been hired to conduct an independent review of the hospital's policies and practices. Her first stop was Dr. Washington's office. "Dr. Washington, I want to thank you for agreeing to participate in this review. I know this has been a difficult time for you." "Thank you, Dr. Foster. I appreciate the hospital taking this seriously." Dr. Foster, a distinguished woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes, opened her tablet and began taking notes. "I'd like to start by understanding your experience from the beginning, not just the incident with Thompson, but your overall experience since arriving at the hospital." Dr. Washington considered the question. "Before the incident, I was excited about the position. The hospital has a good reputation, and I was looking forward to implementing some new protocols in the emergency department. And after the incident, I realized that there were cultural issues I hadn't anticipated. The way Thompson treated me wasn't just about one security guard. It was about assumptions and biases that seemed to be embedded in the hospital's culture. Can you give me specific examples? Dr. Washington thought about the past 2 weeks. Several times I've been asked to show my ID badge in areas where other physicians walk through unchallenged. I've had nurses question my orders in ways that seem different from how they interact with other attendings. Patients have asked if I'm really the doctor. How do you think your colleagues have responded to the media attention? It's mixed. Some have been very supportive. Others seem to think I've brought negative attention to the hospital unnecessarily. Dr. Foster nodded, making notes. I've been reviewing the complaint files, and I've identified a pattern of incidents involving minority staff members. Are you aware of these other cases? I am now. I've spoken with Dr. Williams and Dr. Mendez. What did they tell you? That they experienced similar treatment from Thompson, filed complaints, and felt like nothing was done about it. Why do you think these complaints weren't taken seriously? Dr. Washington chose her words carefully. I think there was a willingness to give Thompson the benefit of the doubt, to assume that his actions were justified rather than examining whether there was a pattern of discrimination. And what would you like to see change? I want to see accountability, not just for Thompson, but for the administrators who ignored the complaints. I want to see training that actually addresses unconscious bias, and I want to see a commitment to creating an inclusive environment for all staff members. After Dr. Washington left, Dr. Foster spent the next several hours interviewing other hospital employees. The stories she heard painted a disturbing picture. Dr. Lisa Park, the chief of surgery, admitted that she'd heard complaints about Thompson but hadn't taken them seriously. I thought it was just personality conflicts. Marcus could be abrasive, but I didn't think it was about race. Nurse Patricia Collins had a different perspective. I saw how Thompson treated minority staff members differently. He was more aggressive, more suspicious. But when I mentioned it to my supervisor, I was told that Thompson was just doing his job. Dr. Carlos Mendez, who still worked at the hospital, described his experience in detail. Thompson detained me for over an hour, calling my credentials into question. He made me feel like a criminal in my own workplace. Did you file a complaint? I did, but nothing came of it. I was told that Thompson was following security protocols. How did that make you feel? Like I didn't matter. Like the hospital cared more about protecting Thompson than protecting me. The interviews continued throughout the week. Dr. Foster spoke with administrators, security staff, nurses, physicians, and support personnel. A clear pattern emerged. Thompson had been targeting minority employees for years, subjecting them to additional scrutiny and treating them with suspicion. Complaints had been filed, but they were consistently dismissed or minimized. The administration had failed to recognize the pattern because they hadn't bothered to look for one. Each incident was treated as isolated rather than part of a larger problem. When Dr. Foster presented her preliminary findings to the hospital board, the room fell silent. Dr. Foster, are you saying that we have a systemic discrimination problem? Asked Board Chairman Dr. Robert Stevens. I'm saying that you've had multiple incidents involving the same security guard and the same pattern of behavior, and you failed to address them appropriately. But each complaint was investigated? Each complaint was dismissed without serious consideration. The investigations were superficial at best. Board member Maria Rodriguez raised her hand. What are your recommendations? Dr. Foster pulled out her report. First, immediate termination of Marcus Thompson. Second, comprehensive diversity training for all staff members. Third, revision of security protocols to prevent racial profiling. Fourth, establishment of an independent ombudsman to investigate discrimination complaints. And fifth, asked Dr. Stevens, a public apology to Dr. Washington and the other physicians who were mistreated, along with a commitment to creating a culture of inclusion and respect. The board members exchanged glances. The recommendations were extensive and would require significant resources to implement. Dr. Foster, what happens if we don't take these steps? You'll continue to face discrimination lawsuits, negative publicity, and difficulty recruiting and retaining minority physicians. More importantly, you'll be failing in your mission to provide the best possible care to your patients. Meanwhile, Marcus Thompson was meeting with his lawyer in a downtown office building. The lawyer, John Morrison, had been reviewing the hospital's personnel files and the media coverage of the incident. Marcus, I have to be honest with you. Your case is not strong. What do you mean? I was doing my job. I followed security protocols. The problem is the pattern of complaints. If this were one isolated incident, we might be able to argue that it was a misunderstanding. But with 7 complaints over 5 years, all involving minority staff members, it looks like discrimination. Thompson's face flushed. I never discriminated against anyone. I treated everyone the same. That's not what the evidence shows. The complaint files indicate that you subjected minority employees to additional scrutiny that you didn't apply to white employees. I was just being thorough. Marcus, listen to me carefully. The hospital is almost certainly going to terminate you. The question is whether you want to fight it or accept a settlement. What kind of settlement? Probably a severance package and a non-disclosure agreement. They'll pay you to go away quietly. Thompson considered this. What if I fight it? You'll lose, and you'll do it publicly, with media coverage and depositions and testimony from all the people you've mistreated over the years. I didn't mistreat anyone, Morrison sighed. Marcus, I've been practicing employment law for 20 years. I can spot discrimination when I see it. You targeted minority employees. The hospital knows it, I know it, and if this goes to court, a jury will know it too. Thompson slumped in his chair. So what do I do? Take the settlement. Start over somewhere else. Learn from this experience. Learn what? That your actions have consequences, that treating people differently because of their race is wrong, that you need to examine your own biases and work to overcome them. Thompson left the lawyer's office feeling defeated. He'd thought of himself as a protector, someone who kept the hospital safe from dangerous people. But as he walked to his car, he began to wonder if he'd been the dangerous one all along. That evening, Dr. Washington received a call from Chief Operating Officer Sullivan. Dr. Washington, I wanted to update you on the investigation. We've made some decisions. What kind of decisions? Marcus Thompson has been terminated. His employment with the hospital is over. Dr. Washington felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that justice had been served. Sadness that it had taken so long. What about the other changes? We're implementing all of Dr. Foster's recommendations. Comprehensive diversity training, revised security protocols, an independent ombudsman, and we're establishing a fund to support diversity initiatives in the medical profession. That sounds promising. Dr. Washington, I also want to personally apologize for what you went through. You deserved better from this institution. Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. I appreciate that. There's one more thing. The board would like to offer you a formal role in implementing these changes. We'd like you to serve as the hospital's first Chief Diversity Officer, in addition to your role as Director of Emergency Medicine. Dr. Washington was surprised. That's a significant responsibility. It is. but you've already shown the leadership and courage needed to drive real change. We think you're the right person for the job." Dr. Washington considered the offer. It would mean additional work, additional scrutiny, and additional responsibility, but it would also mean the opportunity to ensure that no other physician faced what she had faced. "I'll need to think about it." "Of course. Take all the time you need." "After the call, doctor." Washington sat in her office thinking about how much had changed in just 2 weeks. She'd gone from being a new hire focused on clinical work to being the face of a discrimination case that had made national news. It wasn't the career path she'd planned, but it was the one she'd been given, and she was determined to make the most of it. 1 month after the incident, St. Mary's Hospital held a town hall meeting to address the discrimination issues that had been uncovered. The hospital's main auditorium was packed with employees, patients, community members, and media representatives. Dr. Washington sat on the stage alongside Chief Operating Officer Sullivan, Board Chairman Dr. Stevens, and Dr. Foster. The weight of the moment was palpable. Sullivan approached the microphone first. "Thank you all for coming. We're here tonight to address the serious issues that have been brought to light regarding discrimination at our hospital." She paused, looking out at the crowd. "I want to start by acknowledging that we failed. We failed Dr. Washington. We failed other physicians and staff members who experienced discrimination, and we failed the patients who depend on us to provide the best possible care." A murmur ran through the audience. Many had expected denials or deflections, not this direct acknowledgement of responsibility. Marcus Thompson's employment with this hospital has been terminated, but that's not enough. We've identified a pattern of discrimination that was allowed to continue for years because we didn't take complaints seriously. Dr. Stevens stood up next. "As chairman of the board, I want to apologize personally to Dr. Washington and to every other employee who has experienced discrimination at this hospital. We should have done better." When it was Dr. Washington's turn to speak, she stood slowly and approached the microphone. The auditorium fell silent. 3 weeks ago, I was humiliated, physically restrained, and prevented from providing emergency medical care to a critically injured patient. It was one of the most degrading experiences of my professional life. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But I've learned that my experience wasn't unique. Other physicians, nurses, and staff members have faced similar treatment. The difference is that this time someone caught it on video. The audience was completely quiet now, hanging on her every word. I want to be clear about something. This isn't about one security guard. This is about a culture that allowed discrimination to flourish, a culture that dismissed complaints, ignored patterns, and failed to protect its own employees. Dr. Washington looked out at the crowd, making eye contact with faces both familiar and unknown. I'm staying at this hospital because I believe change is possible, but only if we all commit to doing better, only if we acknowledge that unconscious bias exists and work actively to overcome it. She gestured to the other panel members. The hospital has made commitments, new policies, new training, new oversight. But policies don't change hearts and minds. Only we can do that. When the floor was opened for questions, the first person to stand was Maria Rodriguez, the wife of the patient Dr. Washington had saved. Dr. Washington, my husband is alive because of you. But more than that, you showed dignity and grace in the face of hatred. You're an inspiration to all of us. The applause was spontaneous and sustained. Dr. Washington felt tears welling up in her eyes. The next speaker was Dr. Patricia Williams, who had flown in from her new hospital to attend the meeting. I want to thank Dr. Washington for having the courage to speak up when I couldn't. For years, I carried the pain of what happened to me at this hospital. Seeing someone fight back and demand change gives me hope." More applause. Dr. Washington realized that her story had resonated far beyond the walls of this hospital. A young medical student stood up next. "Dr. Washington, I'm a first-year student and I'm African American. Your story has inspired me to continue pursuing medicine despite the challenges I know I'll face. What advice would you give to students like me?" Dr. Washington thought about the question. "I would tell you to never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. You have every right to be in medicine. You have unique perspectives and experiences that will make you a better physician. And remember that excellence is the best response to discrimination." The questions continued for over an hour. Employees shared their own experiences with discrimination. Community members expressed their support for the changes being implemented. Media representatives asked about the hospital's commitment to diversity. Through it all, Dr. Washington felt a growing sense of purpose. This was about more than just her personal experience. It was about creating a better future for everyone who walked through the hospital's doors. After the town hall, Dr. Washington was approached by a group of young physicians and medical students. "Dr. Washington, we wanted to thank you for fighting for us," said Dr. Jennifer Kim, a second-year resident. "We know this couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't easy," Dr. Washington admitted, "but it was necessary." "Are you really taking on the diversity officer role?" asked another resident. "I am. It's a chance to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else." "How do you balance being a physician with being an advocate?" asked a medical student. Dr. Washington considered the question. "I don't think they're separate roles. As physicians, we're supposed to do no harm. That applies to how we treat our colleagues just as much as how we treat our patients." Over the following weeks, Dr. Washington threw herself into both of her roles. As Director of Emergency Medicine, she implemented new protocols that improved patient care and reduced wait times. As Chief Diversity Officer, she developed training programs that addressed unconscious bias and created support networks for minority employees. The changes weren't immediate or easy. Some employees resisted the new diversity initiatives. Others complained that the hospital was being too politically correct. But gradually, the culture began to shift. Dr. Washington noticed it in small ways first. Security guards who greeted minority staff members with respect rather than suspicion. Nurses who listened to orders without questioning credentials. Administrators who took discrimination complaints seriously. 3 months after the incident, Dr. Washington received a letter that brought tears to her eyes. It was from Marcus Thompson. "Dr. Washington," the letter began, "I know you have no reason to forgive me for what I did to you, but I wanted you to know that I've been doing a lot of thinking about that night." The letter continued, "I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I acted the way I did. I've come to realize that I had biases I didn't even know I had. I made assumptions about you based on your race and your appearance, and I was wrong. I've also learned about the other physicians I mistreated over the years. I thought I was protecting the hospital, but I was actually hurting the people who were there to help patients. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to do better. I've been volunteering at a community health clinic, and I'm working on examining my own prejudices. I hope someday I can make amends for the harm I caused." The letter was signed simply, Marcus Thompson. Dr. Washington sat in her office, reading the letter over and over. She thought about the man who had grabbed her arm, who had threatened to have her arrested, who had humiliated her in front of dozens of people. And she thought about the man who had written this letter, who was clearly struggling to understand his own actions and make amends. It didn't excuse what he had done, but it offered something she hadn't expected: hope that people could change. 6 months after the incident, Dr. Washington was invited to speak at the annual conference of the American Medical Association. Her topic: Creating Inclusive Healthcare Environments. Standing before an audience of over 2,000 physicians, administrators, and healthcare professionals, Dr. Washington felt the familiar flutter of nerves that preceded important moments. But this time, the nerves were accompanied by something else: a deep sense of purpose. 6 months ago, I was physically restrained by security while trying to save a patient's life, she began, her voice steady and clear. Today, I stand before you not as a victim, but as someone who has learned that our greatest challenges can become our most powerful catalysts for change. The audience was silent, attentive. Dr. Washington continued, "That night changed everything for me, but more importantly, it changed everything for the institution I work for and the community we serve. It forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about bias in healthcare settings." She clicked to her first slide, which showed statistics on healthcare disparities. The data tells us that discrimination in healthcare isn't rare, it's systemic. Minority physicians report higher rates of workplace discrimination. Patients of color receive different standards of care. The question isn't whether bias exists in our hospitals, it's what we're going to do about it. After her presentation, Dr. Washington was approached by Dr. Michael Chen, the chief medical officer of a large hospital system in California. "Dr. Washington, your presentation was powerful. We've been struggling with similar issues at our hospitals. Would you consider consulting with us on developing our diversity initiatives?" "I'd be honored, Doctor," Washington replied, "but I want to be clear about something. This isn't about checking boxes or avoiding lawsuits. Real change requires commitment from the top down and willingness to have difficult conversations." "That's exactly what we need," Dr. Chen said. "Someone who won't sugarcoat the hard truths." On the flight home, Dr. Washington reflected on how much had changed. The scared, humiliated physician who had been dragged away from a patient 6 months ago felt like a different person. She had found her voice, her purpose, and perhaps, most importantly, her power to create meaningful change. Back at St. Mary's Hospital, the transformation was becoming more visible. The diversity training programs Dr. Washington had implemented were showing results. Employee satisfaction surveys indicated improved workplace culture. Most importantly, patient satisfaction scores had increased across all demographic groups. But the work was far from over. During a staff meeting, Dr. Washington addressed a room full of department heads. "I want to share some statistics with you," she said, pulling up a presentation. "In the past 6 months, we've seen a 40% decrease in workplace discrimination complaints. Patient satisfaction scores have improved by 15% across all departments. And perhaps most telling, we've had 0 incidents of inappropriate security interventions with medical staff." Dr. Foster, now a strong ally, nodded approvingly. "Dr. Washington, the emergency department has never run more smoothly. The changes you've implemented have improved both staff morale and patient outcomes." "That's because diversity isn't just about fairness," Dr. Washington explained. "It's about excellence. When we eliminate bias, we make better decisions. When we respect all perspectives, we provide better care. When we create inclusive environments, we attract and retain the best talent." After the meeting, Dr. Washington walked through the hospital corridors. She noticed things that might have seemed small to others but meant everything to her. A security guard nodding respectfully to a young black resident. A nurse listening attentively to instructions from a Hispanic physician. An administrator taking notes during a meeting with an Asian department head. These moments reminded her why the fight had been worth it. Later that evening, Dr. Washington received a call from Dr. Patricia Williams, her colleague, who had left the hospital years earlier due to discrimination. "Sarah, I've been following the changes at St. Mary's. I wanted you to know that your courage has inspired changes at my new hospital too. We're implementing similar diversity initiatives." "That's wonderful, Patricia. But you know what? I think you were courageous long before I was. You just didn't have the platform to make your voice heard." "Maybe, but you showed me that walking away doesn't have to be the only option. Sometimes staying and fighting is the answer." 1 year after the incident, Dr. Washington stood in the same emergency department where everything had changed. She was reviewing cases with a group of residents when she noticed a young security guard she hadn't seen before. "Excuse me," she said, approaching him. "Are you new here?" "Yes, ma'am. First week on the job. I'm Officer Davis." "Well, Officer Davis, welcome to St. Mary's. I'm Dr. Washington, Director of Emergency Medicine." "I know who you are, Dr. Washington. We learned about you during our training, about the importance of respecting all medical staff and never interfering with patient care." Dr. Washington smiled. "I'm glad to hear that. If you ever have questions about medical situations, please don't hesitate to ask any of the physicians or nurses. We're all here to help each other." "Thank you, Dr. Washington. I will." As Officer Davis walked away, Dr. Washington felt really good about what she had done. She wasn't happy because she was famous. She was happy because she had helped make things better. Now, doctors, nurses, and security guards could work together with respect. That night, as she drove home, Dr. Washington thought about everything that had happened. She remembered feeling hurt, scared, and angry. But now all those bad feelings had turned into something good. She learned that sometimes we have to fight battles we never wanted to fight. Her phone buzzed with a text from her husband. "Saw your interview on the news tonight. Proud of you. Dinner's waiting." Dr. Washington smiled, thinking about how even her family relationships had been affected by the changes in her life. Her husband had watched her transform from someone who avoided conflict to someone who faced it head on. Their children had learned about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. As she pulled into her driveway, Dr. Washington realized that the incident that had nearly broken her spirit had ultimately revealed her strength. She had discovered that being a physician wasn't just about healing bodies. It was about healing systems, cultures, and communities. The work would continue. There would be more hospitals to consult with, more training programs to develop, and more difficult conversations to have. But she was ready for it all. Dr. Washington had found her calling, and she had no intention of ever being silent again.